Hello again. Look, today I got my African shirt on again. Yesterday I lost my mind and came here too quickly. Sometimes I just get excited to come here. And the reason for that is that this disciplined thing that I do actually is so useful for me. Just the doing of it, or the not doing of it, if you listen to what I was saying yesterday. It's weird how quickly something tangible like community becomes something like let's cultivate dreams, becomes how do you do that? And you get to something like not doing, which is like, what the hell is that? It becomes very obscure. And as I've said many times, um, I go on the internet and try to find other people who are interested in the same things that I am. And invariably, it's just such a strange collection of idiosyncratic types, and I don't feel much resonance there. Keep looking for community and I never find it. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? But not doing, is a very key piece. You got to understand that. You got to understand it, because if you don't understand that, you can never tap flow state inside. And without flow state, you're just a prisoner of the world, just a prisoner of your mind. What can I say? You know what I mean? And I don't say that as some kind of saintly person. I'm just saying this is someone who has been broken out of the prison, and here you find me, exploring life outside the prison cell, as it were. And the thing that got me is that the thing that got me this time is something that I read on the BBC yesterday. There was a suicide in the U.S., suicide of a promising young university student. And, there was no signs, he was engaged to be married, all these beautiful things that he was doing, seemed to have so much promise and so much potential. And his poor old dad had even talked to him hours before he did it, and everything was fine, he said, and then gone. And as a parent myself, I can't even imagine the pain and the confusion of the suicide of a child. I don't know. And then there's another part of me, though. There's another part of me that thinks, if you knew that person, if you really had a connection with them, I think you would know. You could tell. No one's that polished, I say that because my parents never knew me. They never knew me, not even my mom. I was closer to my mom than my dad, and neither of them ever knew me. She didn't know me either. And so, I'm left with that Gangster's Paradise lyric. If you don't reach me, how can you teach me? Right? So sadly, that was, the story of my upbringing. And I was definitely lived in an isolated world of inner abstraction, mulling all over how awful I thought I was, how wrong I was in the face of my parents, because if they didn't understand me, well, then what kind of freak of nature was I, They even took me to a psychiatrist when I was like 10, I think, 10 or 11 maybe, in that range. The psychiatrist told them that I was perfectly fine, but that it didn't help them, just led them probably to greater perplexity, right? I wish now in hindsight that I could have talked to him a few times, and, I needed someone, I needed someone. And unfortunately, in my story, no one was there, or maybe the people that were there couldn't penetrate that hard shell of trauma conditioning that had already entrapped me inside. I don't know. You can't second guess spirit, though, because when you wake up, that's the moment your life begins. And as I've said to you before, my life began in 2018. I had lots of years before that, but never could I penetrate that shell of the trauma conditioning, right? And how that became really, really, really a life-destroying condition inside myself was the interaction between my inner shit conditioning and the toxic culture that we live in. And this is why I go back to that story from the BBC. I used to love the BBC because it's like I felt that here's a news outlet where I can actually trust what's being said, right? But so in the article they ask the question. They go, "Oh, you know, successful young man commits suicide in the US. Suicide numbers are rising. Why? Oh, and then the article just goes, oh, so much promise. No one knew. He didn't talk to anybody, you know? And so, in other words, this is someone who lived a double life, who, in all of his connections, to his fiance and to his parents, he had a particular facade that he was living, probably the product of his conditioning, I would imagine, not having known him at all. And then inside was this growing despair, And when that despair touches the toxic culture, it only deepens and worsens. Because I think all the mistakes in my life, especially my mistakes as I got into my 40s, where things got really bad and where I got into bad trouble, which led me to getting arrested and led me into these troubles in my life. It's like, also no coincidence to my liberation, but it was despair. It was despair. Not seeing any example anywhere of anything positive. I mean, and yet we're going to have a question about it, like, why is suicide rising? How about despair? How about hopelessness? How about realizing? And here I am as an old man now. You know what I mean? I wonder the kind of things I'm going to see before the end of my life. But these children, like, what world are they going to grow up into? Where like the hegemony of the very, very rich is so powerful and so controlling that Orwell and Huxley couldn't have even imagined. I mean, their imaginations of tyranny don't come close to the extent to which tyranny can operate in our lives. And what is that tyranny? It is enslavement of the human spirit, is what I've got to say. Because look at it, everything is a commodity. Education is a commodity. Your mental health is a commodity. Everything's got a drug. Everything's got a material solution that you pay money for. It is a sickness. It's a deep, deep sickness. And it's pushed by an engine of ideology, It's called capitalism. But capitalism doesn't get to the heart of it, because capitalism is the essence of some entrepreneurial person with an idea who, through their creation, enters the world and makes some kind of business happen, right? When I say, capitalism is to blame, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, the marketplace has been a part of human civilization from the beginning of human civilization, in terms of like mixed communities, communities interact. Then there's a marketplace between them where they trade and buy and sell and whatever, What I'm talking about is essentially the ideological transformation of colonialism and its certainty in spiritual ideology, which is Christianity, and the enslavement of the world to that ideology. Then politically, that gets let go of, and it's inherited by the oligarchs, by the plutocrats, whatever you want to call them. It's the same spirit at work here, the spirit of domination and tyranny and violence and slavery. That's what our culture is. That's what our society is in the West, in North America. That's what it is. And politics is just like a vending machine of products that we didn't ask for and don't want. And you got to put your money and choose between a selection that you don't even want. I mean, it's like, because there is no solution. Like I sort of alluded to in one of the previous moments like this that I gave, that like, it's like left and right are just varieties of oppression now. On the right, you got old-fashioned repression, where it's like, get the guns and let's circle the wagons around our ignorance and ignore the world. They're the ones who just ignore the climate catastrophe that's going on and blindly accept that somehow money people are gonna serve us. You know what I mean? On the other hand, you got this liberal agenda, and it's all about censorship. Censorship is simply tyranny. I don't care how you dress it up. That's all it is, And the problem is, depending which variety of tyranny you want, this is soft tyranny versus the hard tyranny. And by the way, the soft tyranny of censorship is backed up with violence, because implicit in left-wing tyranny is the threat of the police, is the threat of the military in the end, depending how far you want to resist that censorship. Eventually, the guys with the guns are coming for you. I'd say that right-wing tyranny, getting the guns is a little more present, but it's the same threat in left-wing tyranny. And that's all we're looking at. We're looking at a variety, a spectrum of tyranny. That's what our government has become. And it's depressing, If you only think about that, if you just get caught up in only thinking about that, it will lead to despair. And I know that because of my own inner failings, I'm not putting any blame on society. I know all my decisions were my own. And my healing journey is the process of recapitulating and unifying and integrating myself into a whole that I can live and prosper with in whatever form life materializes until death sets me free from this this carnival ride for now or whatever, But even so, I'm taking responsibility for myself. And at the end of the day, I don't talk about the toxic culture too much. Seeing that article, this is the BBC. Are you telling me that you don't know why suicides would be on the rise? Look at the shallow world of dissonance and disconnection that the very tool of our evolution, the internet, is creating in us. Rather than bringing us together, it's just fracturing us into groups who are bandying words of hate. And yeah, hate is out there. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think in the extreme that it needs censorship, So, the internet should be an evolutionary tool. It's becoming just a tool of dissonance and division and ignorance, I mean, again, I invoked Orwell, okay? Well, in 1984, part of what's going on in that tyranny is the reduction of language. They're reducing language. They're cutting out words because, of course, that's a very simple linguistic analysis. The fewer words, the smaller the world. It's not to say the world has decreased, but if we can't talk about certain things because there's no language for it, then those things are less likely to exist. You become more susceptible to propaganda, which was pretty much what he was talking about, right? So I find it extremely disturbing. Remember, I'm an old geezer. I'm a 20th century man, right? So when Twitter came out and this mainstream central core of communication amongst people is reduced to a certain number of characters, not even words, not even vocabulary, but characters. Think of the limitation of our consciousness if we choose to squeeze ourselves into that medium. I mean, who am I to talk against Twitter? Because the whole world loves Twitter. The whole world communicates on Twitter. We're learning to communicate in such a reduced linguistic set that includes like images and acronyms and abbreviations. It's like it is a new speak. It is a new speak. And it just is pervading more and more and more. And what that does then is it changes our capacity to pay attention. The internet's changing our capacity to pay attention, and no one seems to care what it's doing. I mean, we talk about it. Oh, screen time, limit your screen time. We know that, maybe children shouldn't be having so much screen time. But how do we make that happen? It's impossible unless some kind of government regulation comes in, and that's just tyranny, because the will to live your life is an inner situation. It exists in we, the end users. We, you and me and whoever else is around us. We're the ones who have to take hold and take conscious control of this internet thing that we're a part of and look at it. You know what I mean? So, why is suicide rising? Look around you. Look at this world. Where's the hope? Who's got any hope in this world? People go through university. It's just the commodification of education. Now it's not just school, then you graduate, maybe get a job. No, now university is something where you have to buy your way into a job, and you buy it at a very high price. So you start life $80,000 to $100,000 in debt for most people, and then what? You're just trapped in this credit cycle forever. Credit enslavement, and it's a willing enslavement. That's the frightening part. Is that this is a new tyranny in that, yes, it's backed up by the guns, but it's actually created by a willingness on the part of the enslaved, because there's enough pleasures that, oh, okay, I'll go along with that. No one questions, no one worries, right? And behind it all, we got this brutal environmental degradation. The real, like, we're looking at our climate, it's changing. It's even talked about in the media. Concern for was it food supply or food safety? I mean, in our Canadian media, I never heard these words before. Now they're being bandied out there. Well, we might do away with best before labels. Came a news story because we're concerned about food security. I mean, even talking about that. I mean, I agree. Best before labels inspires people to throw food out perhaps before you need to, right? And so in that, there's an interesting disconnection between the individual and their food. Like you can't smell, you can't look at food, you're not aware of when you bought it. There's a lack of awareness of one's own food there that I think is something that's the inner journey for each of us. And yet from a governmental perspective, to even say that in the news, I mean, we're one step away from rationing in a way. I know that's a doom prognostication, but when you hear something like that in the news, it's like a groundwork, or the next wars are going to be fought over water, people say. I mean, just look around. You can find these reports. You can find these commentaries, right? And it's like, and the impact on the environment of the raising temperature, And tell me where the hope is there. Tell me where the hope is, right? Or the fact that we all know that we are under the dictatorship of the rich. It's everywhere. It's not questioned. Everyone knows it. But our strength seems to be sapped by all the things that are holding us down, are the things which weaken us, our enslavement to the technology, our enslavement to the ideologies, like, well, there's no better way, we've just got to keep going, just got to keep pushing, we've got to have trust in those people, and where's the hope? Where's the hope? Unless you're born rich, and even then, what life is that, Anyway, see what I mean? It's a topic, it's depressing, and it leads to despair, and I don't think that someone choosing suicide is that much deranged as we might suggest to them. Like, what's the hope? What's the future? And I talked to my dear friend, and he gets staunch about, well, democracy is as good thing as we got. There is no other avenue. Just like Churchill once said, democracy is the very worst system of government, and yet it's the best thing we have. And that's true. Churchill, here's a guy who, if I think about him in the context of World War II, I love him, and I'm inspired by him and his speeches, his stance against Nazism. Churchill moves me, right? And yet, if I look at him as an earth being, and his attitude towards Gandhi and towards the empire, I think, oh my God, horrible imperialist despot. Like, both those images of the man coexist in me at the same time, because there is no figure in history now who doesn't have a double figure, On the one hand, the good person that he was inside the old paradigm, and also how we look at him now from beyond the end of the total unquestioned legitimacy of the Western European white Christian paradigm. We're beyond that now. It's gone, and it's just a faction now. It's a faction like Trumpism. So anyway, but Churchill, I'm just invoking him to suggest to remember that quote, right? Democracy is the worst possible form of government, and yet it's the best that we've got. Okay, so that surrender of imagination and visualization is exactly what I'm talking about here. We, all of us, we end users out here, you and me and everyone we have to cultivate our capacity to visualize the future. It's as simple as that. To say democracy is shit, to say our democracy is shit, to acknowledge that our culture is just a bunch of toxic, tyrannical bullshit vended by the very powerful, who are actually, it's not even old-fashioned tyranny. Old-fashioned tyranny is like Vladimir Putin. He's like a modern czar, you know? You look at Putin and you listen to things he says, not only do you get flavors of Stalinism and the Soviet era, you get flavors of Tsarism from like hundreds of years ago. Like I hear the things Putin says, and I get these weird time warp impressions. He's got flavors of Stalinism and communism, you know, basically Soviet era tyranny, flavors of Tsarism, which was just old fashioned, you know, European dominance, right? That I just mentioned. Like that's old fashioned tyranny, right? Which is to say, you know, he's a tough guy. You know, he's a tough guy. And, you know, we don't even know behind the scenes how many people he's murdered and had dealt with. I mean, we know about Navalny, and the whole world is shocked that he's dead now. But what do you know? That's what tyrants do, right? And yet we're powerless to do anything about that because Russia's very, very powerful and they have a nuclear arsenal. So he's a tough guy and he's got a lot of physical power. He's an exemplar of old-fashioned tyranny, right? But in our world, in the West, we've got new-fashioned tyranny. We get the tyranny of the 1%. And I think what's really interesting to me is that I find that Western hegemony is based on the Christian ideology, right? And let's remember one of Jesus's sayings. You know, he said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And so here's this beautiful idea: the meek will inherit the earth. You know, Sting sang about it. You know, are we going to be like dinosaurs and blow ourselves off with atom bombs, or are we going to be soft and gentle and be with each other? Which is the truth of that statement. And of course, Jesus was speaking in the context of Rome and Roman military might, right? Rome was the mighty, and yet it collapsed, as all physical tyrannies will collapse. No matter how powerful Putin is now, he'll fall eventually, he or his successors, whoever it's going to be. No tyranny lasts, right? But the terrible, terrible irony of the meek shall inherit the earth is that the 1% are the meek. All the business people I've met are tremendously physically cowardly. You know, look at the timidness in business, even in entertainment, which is their greatest tool to enslave us, right? And yet most entertainment is absolute garbage now because no one can take the chance of supporting a good idea. It's just rehashed, completely safe garbage, you know, because even in risking money, capitalists, the capitalist overlords, they're timid and cowardly beings. They are physically the meek. The meek have inherited the earth. The meek are the 100%. The 1%, what am I saying? The meek are the capitalist overlords. We never hear about them. They never are involved in any kind of military way. They're not tough people. They are the cowards and the secretive, behind the scenes overlords. You know, they pull the strings of like the classical tyrants who then, you know, dominate us by various means. But yeah, that's a terrible and terrifying inversion of that Jesus statement. The meek shall inherit the earth. Well, my friend, the meek have inherited the earth. They are the 1%. They are meek. They are frightened. They're timid. They're hidden. And yet they run the show. They own the world. This is new-fashioned tyranny and the way it dominates. And so here I am extolling all of these aspects of the toxic culture the way I see, right? And then I go back to that article and I think to myself, why? Why would someone commit suicide? Are you kidding me? Wake up, you know? Wake the fuck up. I went through that article, nothing was said. Oh, those poor parents. Oh, studies show that suicide is increasing. Oh, wow. We've got to continue the studies. We've got to work out why. What a goddamn laugh. What a laugh it is. I mean, and it's not a happy laugh. It's a disturbed, like, oh, you know, like, so, I mean, I don't know what to say other than that, you know? If there's no dialogue about this toxic culture, if there's no dialogue about understanding the toxic culture and trying to unhinge and unhook from it, then despair mental illness, addiction, suicide, which are all on the rise. Mental illness is becoming a pandemic now, and no coincidence. And look at the solutions. Just give them medications. Just vend medications. Don't ask why. Don't try to go within. And especially do not question the system. No, you can't do that. No, because after all, it's all we've got. If we didn't have the system, the world would end. Well, my friend, the world is going to end anyway, and no one's talking about it. Like, look at history. Rome fell, Athens fell, the Mayans fell. Anywhere you want to look at any kind of civilization. The Egyptians fell, wherever you want to go. Anytime you get an empire, no matter how powerful it is, no matter how eternal that they want to dream themselves to be. Look at Hitler, 1,000-year Reich, he said. And it's like, idiocy, ignorance. Hatred cannot last. Tyranny will not last. However, willing, self-accepting slavery can possibly last, as long as you don't burn out with despair and depression before then. And in the end, what will happen when our environment is degraded? What will happen when water becomes a commodity that corporations are striving to control? It just stops my thinking. It's so horrific, because it represents a kind of like a visualization so profoundly evil that I can hardly believe that people have come up with it. It's like, and of course, here come the Christian ideologists. It's the devil. It's Satan. It's like, so then of course, let's revert back to the old paradigm then. It's like, oh God, here we go again, right? It's like, if there is evil, it's ignorance, it's closed-mindedness, it's greed, and like, these are things in the human heart, and that's only transformable if we take hold of ourselves. It's all we can do as individuals, And this is another aspect of why I'm doing this, is because I was a part of the problem. And I had all my justifications, I had all my rationalizations, and yet, in the end of the day, I couldn't break my own conditioning. And when my conditioning was broken and I came to my own place, I could realize the interaction between my own inner unhealthiness and the rank and obvious unhealthiness in our culture. And now that I'm aware of it, the fact that no one is ever talking about it, like, there seems to be no hope. Like, no wonder people are contemplating suicide. No wonder. Don't wonder about it. Just look around. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to turn? Where is the goodness? I don't see much goodness around, to be quite honest, And usually when I find the goodness, it's in individuals, like Sadhguru. I listen a lot to him, of course, and it's like, it's his example. It's one of the examples which makes me want to be here, and talk to you, is that, my God, like, there is no way to change the system. It's fucked, I'm a believer of that 60s beat ideology of tune in, turn on, and drop out. I don't know how else to say that, but it's a true way, and that was being espoused by people who were inside of the old paradigm. And what we're in now is far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Far more dangerous, because this technology is a power to totally enslave our visualization and keep us from the possibility of visualizing a better world. Like, consider Eckhart Tolle, one of Eckhart Tolle's books, A New Earth. A New Earth. That's a beautiful idea. And he is someone who is working, I think, ultimately on visualization. Because, as I said, one of his powerful analytical tools was the pain body. The pain body is this conditioning that's inside of us. Just the other day, I was listening to Alan Watts. And by the way, Alan Watts, very cool guy to listen to. Alan Watts is like a voice from my childhood. Alan Watts is a man who was born very early in the 20th century. He was too old to be in World War II, nor would he have fought in World War II, I don't think, because he was very much a peaceable, spiritual, philosophical type of person, right? But what I mean by a voice of my childhood, he's got a British accent, he's kind of humorous, his voice is hoarse from tons of smoking. He was a renowned heavy drinker. He is like definitely that old paradigm white man, right? And so, of course, from my childhood, all the older people around me were like that. They were like him, only they had nothing to say. And he has something to say. So when I say he's a voice of my childhood, he resonates in all those deadly, negative, toxic, traumatized interactions that I went through, except he's bringing wisdom and spiritual knowledge in that weird package. And one of the things he said the other day was how the conditioned response for him, he found it was in school, like pay attention. And then he talks about the various ways he'd get tense around his eyes or tense around his ears and his neck and his throat and his body, the tension of being told to pay attention, be like the rest of the class. So for him, that tension, which is what Eckhart Tolle would call the pain body, right? That was in school for him, the indoctrination of school. And it was such a relief for me to hear him say that, because in my own healing journey, like I recognize all those patterns of physical tension were inside of myself in my home life. I never even made it to school. I was never even really a part of school, because school was out there on the other side of this place where I never belonged anyway. If you don't belong in home, how can you possibly belong in school? I mean, that's how I've looked back and done a kind of archaeology on myself and the way physically my pain is and my patterns of tension and all of the shame and the humiliation and the guilt, always being wrong all the time. Being that person, how could I even approach school? I never got there. I never got to that particular layer of demoralization and traumatization, because my family life had already sealed me up tight, and it took decades upon decades of I don't know what to say, zombie living, to before finally I got set free from that. Alan Watts, though, you know what I mean? He's a guy to listen to, because he's got that slightly humorous Western perspective, heavy drinking, heavy smoking man, and then he's talking about all these important Eastern spiritual realizations, So like he definitely speaks to me in my childhood hurt places, you know what I mean? Whereas a person like Sadhguru is like he's like the final piece of all of my Carlos Castaneda learning, because much of what he says is just bringing a kind of non-cult-like sense to like all the things I learned from Carlos Castaneda. He talks about all the same things, really. I mean, I don't have the time here to enumerate them all, but I find that all of my Carlos Castaneda learning has been lit up and made more sensible and more communicable since listening to Sadhguru. So he's like, the voice of a voice that speaks into my more, dare I say, enlightened being, slightly liberated. And when I say liberated or enlightened, what I mean is that the conditioned response is a fixed state. That's where despair lives. That's where people commit suicide about. It's because they are fixed. They don't see the fluidity. They don't see the life. They just see everything as fixed and insoluble and depressing and ultimately without meaning, and I might as well get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? And that's the conditioned response. And breaking through that is the recognition that there is nothing fixed. Nothing is fixed. So if I talk about enlightenment or liberation or freedom, I really need to speak in ing words, in present continuous, the verbal continuing action, enlightening, liberating, freeing. It's a process, because if you ever think it's finished or you're finished, you've missed out. You have lost it. You've lost whatever it is, the meaning inside yourself. Anything that is fixed is not real. And that's just the way it is, you know? And I'm sorry to say that includes uncertainty, you know? And if you can't accept uncertainty, then you're treading into dangerous waters, because any kind of certainty is dangerous. It is very dangerous. Dangerous in our inner lives, dangerous in our outer lives. Because after all, what are politicians promising us? Certainty. What do the pharmaceutical companies or the food companies or the oil companies, what are they all promising? Certainty, you know? Certainty in whatever avenue they're trying to get money out of you, you know? And it's the lack of uncertainty, which is the scariest thing. COVID struck the world. No one, I didn't hear anybody say, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. This has never happened before, right? Everyone just pretended they knew what they were doing. And you can make an argument, well, the governments have to appear to know what they're doing. Why not have a dialogue? Why not realize that government is supposed to be the people? Why aren't we all talking about it? You know, that's the question. Why weren't we all talking about it? Why couldn't we all just admit that, like, we've never been here before? As a global Earth species, we've never experienced anything of this total connectedness in positive ways, but now connectedness in a very dangerous way, right? No conversation, just a pretense of certainty and autocratic decisions, you know, by who and for who. You know, it's one of those moments. So, you know, despair, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know, again and again, it's like if you just get stuck into the outer world, there is no release. You're just going to get caught in the commodification, and it's just going to wear you down. It's going to drain your energy. It's going to sap you. You're going to constantly be locked in a critical analysis, and you will never get to that liberation point inside, because you got to break the connections inside yourself. You got to loosen yourself from these fixations, you know, whatever they might be. Here I am, a talking head, just saying my own thing here, you know, but yet it's important to me, because if I just sit around here at home stewing about these things, I don't know, it leads to a kind of, for me at least, it leads to a spoiling of my solitude. Without this discipline of honestly striving to be accountable to the unknowable. And by accountable to the unknowable, I just mean accountable to myself in the face of the unknowable. You know, what am I doing? I am choosing to make this positive vibration. I'm choosing to do things differently. I'm choosing to say what I feel and what feels important and right to me, because I lived the other way for too long, and there is no life there, you know? I am leaping off the precipice. This is the process of me, as Carlos Castaneda said, leaping off the cliff. I'm leaving the world of fear and conditioned response behind, and I'm leaping off into this illimitable gulf of possibility. And all I've got is myself. All I've got is that loving energy wellspring of aliveness. And so, because I started this talking about, you know, why is suicide on the rise? I just want to say, you know, I feel terrible for those parents. I can't even imagine what they're going through. I think about this guy's fiance, like, God damn, like what a shock. And at the same time, where are their connections? I mean, suicide is an extreme act, you know? Like in the field, working with mentally ill people and with people with addictions, suicide is a risk. And there's many protocols that you're trained to be aware of. If you're encountering someone who might seem to be suicidal, and the signs are there, if you pay attention, the signs are there. You can see what's going on in someone. You can see when someone is preoccupied, dark, inward, withdrawn. You can hear in their language, you can hear in the tone. There's so many ways to connect to someone if you choose to see, right? But I wonder if that family just got caught up in the semantics. They just caught up into the Facebook presentation. Oh, look, his Facebook looks so happy. Or all his words are positive, right? No one's paying attention to, well, how do I feel when he's saying these things? Are they authentic? Are they genuine? You know, it sounds critical. It sounds like I'm being critical of those people. I empathize with them and feel terrible for them. But I mean, there's such a lack of connection in our world. And it's a lack of connection that goes back to all the things that I've been talking about in this one, which is, again, all the inner conditioned response negativeness, right? And then how that toxically blends with our shit culture, you know what I mean? Which is full of toxicity and tyranny and manipulation and coercion and rank predatory ideology, essentially, perpetrated by a very few people whose names we never know, whose bank accounts we never see. They're just there. We know them. We know them by their name, the 1%. We know what they're doing. And yet, what are you going to do? It's a lack of visualization. It's a lack of empowerment of people. And by empowerment, I mean nothing more than your own love for yourself, for your world, for the people around you, for the generation to come, for the earth, for everything that's on the earth. I don't know. Like it's like when you begin loving, you are an expanding energy, and there is no limit to your expansion. The only limit is going to be when death comes and says, well, you're done with this one. Let's go on to the next one, whatever that is, right? Death completes your journey to spirit. Death completes your journey to wholeness. And so by knowing death now in the moment, I'm free to expand to my maximum, which has no limit. It's an ongoing process. Enlightenment is not a state. It's an enlightening where you continue to shine and glow and grow and expand and include in ever vaster scopes of possibility. This is what it is to be in the seat of infinity. This is what it is to be spiritually alive. This is what it is to tap your aliveness. And this is what we need. We need, all of us individually as end users here, on the other side of these phones and devices and whatnot, is to realize ourselves and then come to the medium with our meaning intact and find out what happens, not get caught up in the shallowness of it all. And because it's the shallowness that is manipulated by the powers that be, whose only design is to further their own solidity and their own money and their own comfort of the world, which is the comfort at the expense of the rest of us and a comfort at the expense of future generations. Like never before in history has the greed of few so impacted the fate not only of the many in the current moment, but also the future. They're literally degrading the future for their moment now, meanwhile, plastering it all over with stock market reports of endless growth. Nothing grows forever. Nothing does. Everything is cyclical. Everything is cyclical, even in this cosmic dance that we talk about as the universe. As far as we conceive it, it's infinity, which means we can never see all of it. All we see is a certain circularity. It's as far as our sight can go. Within that, we perceive a beginning and an end to it. Just as the earth we perceive as a beginning and an end to it. Just as the sun has a beginning and an end to it. Just every human being has a beginning and an end to it. Every atom, every cell has a beginning and an end to it, So why is it that societies and organizations of human civilization, why don't they have beginnings or endings? That's a lie. It's being sold to us. Endless growth. That's what we have forever. Yep, just shut up and get the profits because they're going to go on forever. It's a terrible, terrible lie. So why is there suicide? It's because we live in a world of lies. That's not to say the world is lies. That's not to say I'm vouchsafing some sort of like, God versus Satan argument. What I'm saying is that lies are in the human heart because it's in the human intentions. And the only solution is to stop, go inside, realize your own love, and start there and just see what happens, That's kind of the essence of not doing, is what I said yesterday, right? Not doing what you know to do. And that opens just a bit of a space, just a little bit of a space where something else can happen. And that, to me, is where we all must begin. Space of visualization, dream farming, dream cultivation. Cultivate your dreams. I'm cultivating my dreams. And part of my dream is to simply vibrate with a positive, loving energy position. As a single end user, it's all I can do. Is any other thing that I might do just gets me tied up in the endless negativeness. And we all know where that goes. That goes to any number of the horrible nightmare scenarios that are in the world around us. Don't participate. Create your own. Create your dream, whatever it might be. Find out what's in the way of that and solve it through loving energy and the aliveness of your being. Just take it one step at a time. Bit of a dark one today. Bit of a dark one. But you know what? It's got to happen. We live in a world where there's a lot of darkness, and it's not the darkness that we should fear. Darkness is uncertainty. Darkness is the unmanifest. Right? What the problem is a crippling and an incapacitation of our visualization. That is the essence of what I'm saying to you. We must learn to take hold of how we visualize ourselves and how we visualize our world. Even science is supporting it. I mean, I talked about the outer cosmos. Think about the quantum level of reality, what science is saying to us. No one pays attention to this. I mean, wave state, particle state, is there matter or is there energy? It's both at the same time, depending on what relative perspective you take. It's both at the same time. It's a potential. All of us. Are we particulated as people? Are we waveform as cosmic energy? We are both at the same time. We are the potential of both. Both coexist in a quantum state. Life is a quantum state. So, take control of your creation. Take control of your possibility and materialize or dematerialize in the direction that your loving life force opens for you. If I had a gong, I'd hit it right now. Bong! And I'd leave you with that. As it is, all I can say is stay well. Don't listen to them. Don't let them decide. Come to your place within. Be well. Keep reaching. Keep reaching. I'll see you next time.